Why don't you want your fellow Americans to be great? Why do you attack them? Why do you want to crush their hopes, their dreams? John Lewis. John Lewis, sunrise, February 21st, 1940. Sunset, July 17th, 2020. An American politician, statesman, civil rights activist, and leader, our hero. He was known for leading the first of 3 Selma to Montgomery marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and was an active member of the Democratic Party. He led the Nashville student movement, which was responsible for the desegregation of lunch counters, and at this moment he coined the phrase, good trouble. He was jailed and arrested several times for organizing sit-ins and the freedom rides, which ultimately led to desegregation in buses. John Lewis received many honorary degrees and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He served in the United States House of Representatives from 1987 until his death in 2020. John Lewis fulfilled many roles in the civil rights movement and its actions to end legalized racial segregation in the United States. The name Edmund Pettus no longer is about Edmund Pettus from the Civil War from Confederacy, said Collins Petaway III, a political communications specialist and a Selma native. Because of John Lewis, Edmund Pettus Bridge is now a staple and a symbol of civil rights and voting equality. It's a symbol of hope and of freedom. As many of our elders have fought for their rights and ours, John Lewis represented greatness to the Black community at a crucial time, as he and many other leaders and activists joined together to fight for equal rights for all people. They paved the way for those of us who are still witnessing our families being affected by brutality issues today. The stories of Ahmaud Aubery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd shook the nation. Here are their stories. Don't forget their names and faces, and do not forget the names and the faces of the police who murdered them. Ahmaud Aubery was murdered while jogging in his own community. Ahmaud Aubery, sunrise May 8, 1994, sunset February 23, 2020. He was enrolled at South Georgia Technical College, preparing to become an electrician. On February 23, 2020, Ahmaud Aubery, an unarmed 25-year-old black man, was pursued and fatally shot while jogging near Brunswick in Glenn County, Georgia. Aubery had been pursued by 3 white residents, Travis McMichael, his father Gregory, who were armed and driving a pickup truck, and William Bryan, who followed Aubery in the second vehicle, and he was confronted and fatally shot by Travis McMichael. The Glenn County Police Department said that Brunswick District Attorney Office advised them on February 23rd to make no arrests. The Brunswick District Attorney's Office denied that such advice was given to the GCPD by either the Brunswick District Attorney or her Assistant District Attorneys. On February 24th, Wade Cross Judicial Circuit District Attorney George Barnhill, who had not yet been assigned to the case, advised the GCPD that no arrest should be made. The GBI arrested the McMichaels on May 7th and Bryan on May 21st, charging them with felony murder and other crimes. On June 4th, an additional evidence was presented by the prosecutor to support the murder charges, including a statement to GBI by William Bryan that Travis McMichael said F and as Aubery lay dying. A grand jury subsequently indicted each of the 3 men on charges of malice murder, felony murder, 4 counts of aggravated assault, 3 counts of false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. Aubery's killings and the delayed investigation of arrest suspect reignited debates about racial inequality in the United States. Hashtag I Run With Ahmaud trends around the world in memory of Ahmaud Aubery. In loving memory of Ahmaud Aubery, hashtag I Run With Ahmaud. Breonna Taylor was murdered while sleeping in her own bed at home. Breonna Taylor, sunrise June 5, 1993, sunset March 13, 2020. She's a full-time emergency room technician and a practicing registered nurse. Breonna was 26 years old and was killed in her home after white plainclothes officers forced their way inside of her home with suspected drug dealings. Her boyfriend did not hear any announcement from the officers who were in plain clothes executing a no-knock search warrant and thought they were intruders. He fired one warning shot to warn them after calling his mom and the cops himself. They returned with 32 shots into the apartment, hitting Breonna 8 times. The subsequently filed police report was nearly entirely blank or inaccurate. It stated Taylor had no injuries and that there were no forced entry. All 3 officers involved in the shooting were placed on administrative reassignment pending the outcome of the investigation. On May 5, 2020, Taylor's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. On May 20th, investigations findings were given to Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, while the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office also conduct their own investigations. On September 15th, the city of Louisville agreed to pay Taylor's family $12 million and reform police practices. On September 23rd, a state grand jury indicted Hankerson on 3 counts of wanton endangerment for endangering Taylor's neighbors with his shots. None of the officers involved in the raid has been charged in Taylor's death. Cosgrove was determined to have fired the fatal shot that killed Taylor. Hashtag Say Her Name trends around the world in memory of Breonna Taylor. In loving memory of Breonna Taylor, hashtag Say Her Name. George Floyd was murdered in 8 minutes and 46 seconds while the world watched. George Floyd, sunrise October 14, 1973, sunset May 25, 2020, a hip-hop artist and a mentor in his religious community. The world watched as George Floyd was murdered on television and internet as one cop knelt on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds straight, while 3 other cops watched, did nothing, and stopped civilians from intervening when and prior to it being noticed that George was no longer conscious. The official autopsy report classified Floyd's death as a homicide attributed to cardiopulmonary arrest caused by subdual and restraint, and fentanyl and intoxication and methamphetamine use were listed as significant conditions. A second autopsy commissioned by Floyd's family and performed by Michael Baden without access to various tissue and fluid samples found that the evidence is consistent with mechanical asphyxia as a cause of death, with neck compression restricting blood flow to the brain and back compression restricting breathing. After Floyd's death, protests were held globally against the use of excessive force by police officers against black suspects and lack of police accountability. Protests began in Minneapolis the day after his death and developed in cities throughout the 50 United States. Hashtag I Can't Breathe trends around the world in memory of George Floyd. In loving memory of George Floyd. United States unrest position erupts, and millions of protesters take to the streets demanding justice. The police continued with excessive force for weeks. The 2020 riots. City were burned to the ground due to brutal killings of unarmed African Americans. The 2020 United States racial unrest is an ongoing wave of civil unrest comprising protests and riots against systemic racism towards black people in the United States, notably in the form of police violence. It is partly facilitated by the nationwide Black Lives Matter movement. Following the death of George Floyd, unrest broke out in Minneapolis, St. Paul area on May 26 and quickly spread across the country and the world. Within Minneapolis, widespread property destruction and looting occurred, including a police station being overrun by demonstrators and set on fire, causing the Minnesota National Guard to be activated and deployed on May 28, 2020. By early June, at least 200 American cities had imposed curfews, while more than 30 states and Washington, D.C. had activated over 62,000 National Guard personnel in response to the unrest. By the end of June, at least 14,000 people had been arrested at protests. Polls have estimated that between 15 million and 26 million people have participated at some point in the demonstrations in the United States, making them the largest protests in the United States history. We should not have to fight in order for them to recognize how great we are or remind them that we are human. Never let anything stop your melanin from glowing.
One of the events that took place during year 2020 was the election. We experienced the impeachment of President Trump, House, Senate, Congress, governor, and mayoral elections and decisions by different states. No matter what side you're on or who is in the White House, there are a few things we cannot deny. While some of our politicians were engaging in playground fighting, Americans were facing evictions from their homes, loss of jobs, closure of businesses, both small and otherwise, a decline in the quality of education of our children, overworked educators and professionals, overcapacity hospitals overwhelmed with COVID patients, people dying at higher rates daily, especially Black people. We had reduction in hours and pay for those who were working. We had unsafe work conditions, misallocation of governmental funds, and voter suppression and intimidation. All of these things affected people, our people. No matter your stance, no matter how you feel about the different candidates for the different offices. And all of these, is important that we hold our politicians at the local and national level accountable.